Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the program. Now, grain shipments from Ukraine are to start in the Black Sea following a deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to work together to facilitate the shipment of grain in the Black Sea. Turkey and the UN facilitated negotiations amidst concerns of rising food prices and an impending global food crisis. Now, what is behind this agreement? And why did Russia agree to this deal? And what does it mean for all stakeholders, including us here in Africa? Now, to help us make sense of these new developments, I am now joined by Senior Research Fellow at the Africa Asia Dialogues, Brother Thembisa Fakude. Thembisa, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, Thembisa, are you there? Okay, we seem to be having technical issues. Assalamu alaikum, Thembisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Wa alaikum salam wa
Jazakallah, Jazakallah. That's much better. Jazakallah, Timbisa. I do apologize for being slightly late, very late, in fact, with our initial appointment. I had another interview that ran over. I do apologize, but thank you so much for talking to us. I appreciate your time. Barakallah. Okay, Tembisa. I think the main issue here is who is to who benefits most from this deal. And secondly, how important was it to even be signed in the first place?
Well, it was important because of a few things. One is cutting Russia to size, because Russia thought it could do as it pleases in the Black Sea. And Turkey had to come and reinstate its importance because, as you know, the Black Sea, anything from the Black Sea has to go through Marmara before it reaches the Mediterranean, and Turkey is that gateway. So there's nothing from the Black Sea that can move to the world without going through Turkish waters. So Turkey had to emphasize that because Russia was basically bullying all the countries bordering the Black Sea, pretending that they are actually the main men, and Turkey had to come and remind them of who the real player is, which was one. Two is, I think it was also important because this saves face, particularly to the UN, who has been criticized of not being constructive or played an important role over since the tenure of Guterres started. So leading to the UN General Assembly in September, at least you'll have something to report back to the world and perhaps emphasize on them why it's important to maintain the office of the UN Secretary General. So that's another point. But the other point which I think is very important is it's kind of emphasizes the importance of Turkey within NATO, because Turkey is the main power, particularly the eastern part of Europe, that could continue maintaining the significance of NATO in that part of the world. Turkey with its big guns and sophisticated armory, they'll continue playing an important role on behalf of NATO. And it was, to an extent, a reminder to China, Iran, and Russia that NATO has an influential partner in Turkey in that part of the world. But the other thing is that, of course, Ukrainians have since demonstrated that they're very good politicians and negotiators.
But now the deal was announced on Friday, Tembisa, and then we had on Saturday the Russia bombarding the Odessa port, which is, I think, controlled by Ukraine. Was that something of a violation of that treaty or that agreement?
Yes, it was a violation, but it also points out to two things. One, first, that there's a miscommunication between the politicians and the people on the ground at the moment, or soldiers on the ground on the Russian side, because it was embarrassing for the Minister of Defense to be having signed a treaty in front of Turkey and the world, and suddenly your people bomb the very place that you're supposed to be protecting. So it clearly demonstrates that there's a miscommunication there. Someone is not speaking to another person in terms of ensuring that they communicate the messaging on time. That's one. So it can either be that, or the other one is that just, again, emphasizes the point that everybody else has been saying, that you can never trust the Russians. They, what you call split tongue, they speak double truth one, they will agree in entering an agreement, and at the same time they violate minutes later the same agreement. So it has not been good for Russia either way. One, it
Mm.
just points to a lack of organization within the military, which is something very, very important and key, that there is some sort of synchronization within the military, particularly when it comes to communication. This demonstrates that there isn't anything like that. Second, it just emphasizes that you must never trust the Russians. So what you watch on Hollywood movies about Russians is actually true.
Thembisa, let's talk about Ukraine for a minute. Ukraine, besides the bombardment from the Russians, and Allah Ta'ala knows, who's telling the truth about who's winning the war between themselves and Russia and so on. But they did need some sort of an economic lifeline, and I think this deal gives Ukraine some sort of an economic lifeline. I mean, Ukraine and Russia both, they account for quite a large percentage of cereal grain, producers of cereal grain in the world. But would you say that this gives Ukraine some sort of an economic lifeline?
No, it definitely does, because it is reliant on the exportation of grain and other agricultural products. So this gives it a certain economic lifeline. I mean, things are getting much more expensive. Woke up for suhoor yesterday, and I looked at the price of the wheat bix. They're not cheap anymore because of what's been going on in that part of the world. So it is certainly going to give that economic lifeline and the relief to the Ukrainians. But importantly, it's also a win for the Ukrainians. I think what they're going to start doing now is a staggered negotiation process, and this was one first win for the Ukrainians, with the support of Turkey, of course. I don't think the Russians would have allowed this. But again, Sergei Lavrov, the second most cruel person in Russia, has been visiting, or is on a 3-day visit or tour in Africa. Today was with dictators in Egypt, with Mohammed Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and he's going to be moving to another dictator in Uganda. So he's visiting African countries, and I think this will come in handy for him to say that we are helping you, because the others are saying that the African countries would have likely complained about the flow of into Africa, which has impacted on the economies of Africa.
I think it's very interesting that you bring that up, Thembisa. It's almost like a charm offensive, because, who's to blame for the rising food prices? Who's to blame for the impending food crisis? Who's to blame? Is it Syria? I mean, is it Russia, or is it Ukraine? It seems like Sergei Lavrov wants to answer that question himself and actually go on this charm offensive. Do you think African leaders are going to entertain him or believe him?
Well, I doubt if they will. I think they will. I mean, most of them are what's known as client states. I doubt if Yoweri Museveni will ever question the Russians. No, after Fattah will question the Russians. They're likely to welcome him and smile all the way until they leave. And I don't think they'll raise any serious questions. But in terms of civil society and the media, of course, we are all anticipating and predicting what the discussions are all about. So this is a forwarder for all of us. And it gives us that reason that you and I can speak today and anticipate what the discussions are all about. But again, Lavrov has got nowhere else to go, by the way, since the entire world has shut its airspace for Russian planes, including Russian politicians who've been enjoying themselves in the streets of London over the years. Now they can't go anywhere. So any excuse to leave Russia, even if it means visiting dictators like Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Yoweri Museveni, you have to take the opportunity, because you can't go anywhere from now on.
Wow, it's actually very interesting and fascinating. You did touch on this issue, Thembisa, and that is the relevancy of the United Nations Secretary General's office. Because they were involved heavily in the brokering of this deal, the Ukraine grain deal. Please talk to us about that a little bit more, because when was the last time the world felt that the United Nations Secretary General was actually an important, player in geopolitical space? And why is it important for this particular deal for the United Nations to have been involved?
Well, it's a low hanging, I guess. I mean, the people who did the work were the Turks, and
Yes.
Guterres found it much more easy and convenient to go and claim the first price. But it was the Turks who have led to these negotiations, and they were kind enough to Guterres to allow him to sit on that table. But actually, the UN did nothing, and they've been doing nothing throughout the world in stopping the wars that have been going on. Case in point, the Houthi or the people of Yemen have suffered for such a long time and continue to do so, and they're doing nothing about it. In Tigray, in Ethiopia, have something similar. I mean, various places around the world, people are suffering, and the UN is supposed to be there. So this was a nice photo op for Mr. Guterres to take the prize. By the way, as you know, in September, the entire world is meeting in New York for the UN General Assembly, and it's got something to talk about. Else it would have been another embarrassing year for him, not to have anything to report back to the world about the relevance of this office. Will be extremely important. Now it's just become another organization which is competing for space with Wakfu Lokfin.
Yeah. Now, the African Union Commission Chair, Mustafa Mohammed, has welcomed the signing of the Russia-Ukraine deal, and the Senegalese president saying that this was something that he went to Sochi for in June, talking about the actual grain deal. So, how much, if was the African Union involved in crafting or at least initiating this deal? Because at the end of the day, the war in Ukraine has impacted food security all over the world.
I mean, Fak Mohammed is a joke. Pardon my honesty. This is the same person who facilitated the observer status of Israel within the African Union, as a result polarizing the entire African Union and creating a division on an organization that seeks to be united, given that we're faced with all kind of atrocities and political challenges as Africans. He's going to Russia for his own personal reasons. The world has stayed away from Russia because Russia is an aggressor. In this case, they went into an independent country and decided to apply their scorched-earth policy in terms of flattening the cities of Ukraine and killing hundreds of people. And for Faku Mohammed, who has done nothing for all the wars and disputes that are taking place, particularly in Central Africa, whether it's Congo, or whether it's Guinea-Bissau, all of the places where we're currently facing coups and unstable governments, he has not really shown his face. And he decides now, notwithstanding that the entire world has stayed away from Russia, somehow he decides to go to Russia to the embarrassment of all of us as Africans, because Russia deserves to be isolated, because they are an aggressor in this regard. They went into an independent country and decided to kill thousands of human beings and expel millions of people. I remember the pictures of women abandoning their prams at the border of Poland, if you remember when they were started. Thousands of prams lining up the border as innocent women and children were fleeing this barbarian called Putin and his partner Sergei Lavrov in killing those people. So I'm not quite sure whether Fak Mohammed will agree, will achieve anything in this regard.
Thembisa, I always value your candor, your candor and your honesty, and you don't need to apologize for it. Thank you very much for talking to us this evening, and we certainly hope that we can catch up with you to get more analysis on the geopolitical developments around the world, and particularly in your area of expertise in the Africa and Asia, as well as the Arab hemispheres. Thank you so much again for your time, Thembisa. I really appreciate it.
Assalamu
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Afwan. That was Thembisa Fakude. He's a senior research fellow at the Africa Asia Dialogues, joining us on the line to talk to us about this the Ukraine grain deal. I always said when I'm going to pronounce that, I'm going to get a bit tongue twisted, and I did a few times. What is your feeling about this? I really would, welcome your comments, and your comments you can send to our WhatsApp line, which is 061 766 0355. And I see some of you watching on Facebook, some of you watching on the YouTube as well, and also on our online and streaming platforms. Jazakallah khair for tuning in today. We've come to the end of the program this evening, and I'd like to thank my engineer, Brother Sadiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Breaking stereotypes, moving